This video will be about an additive method for building, in this case, a 12 gauge shotgun barrel. Now I'm going to be using a ludicrously inappropriate design here. It'll be way too short, mostly because of the materials available. And I'm going to be talking about it concerning the idea of building a piece of equipment that would be used as a test barrel to show that this would work or not work. Mostly this is academic. And again, as always, you can just go buy a shotgun for less than $100. If you can't acquire one, if it's not available, if COVID-19 has caused everybody to buy them so you can't get one, okay, fine, you can make one, and this is the information you might need for it, but mostly this is something to ponder. Now we're going to generalize some numbers here so that we can easily look things up on the net. Shotgun shells approximate dimensions are, for this part, which is the main one for building a straight pipe gun, 20.5 millimeters or 81 caliber or 0.81 inches. The rim diameter, the maximum dimension of this shell, is 22.5 millimeter or 88.5 caliber. We can just round them off. Now when we get down here, you can see that the chamber diameters actually have different characteristics, but they're pretty close to that. And if you wanted to, you could look up, and this is me rehashing a previous video, you could type in 0.81 into a search engine, and ID for inner diameter, and steel tubing, and you will be able to find tubing that's ridiculously cheap, and it's sold in lengths that are perfectly fine for making a barrel, and it would work fine. Now, one of the drawbacks with that is, as you can see here, even the shell itself tapers down a bit. But then it goes through something called a forcing cone into the correct bore of a shotgun. And it's supposed to be 72.5 caliber or 18.42 millimeters. So we could call that 18.5 if we wanted to. Now, the idea here is also at the end of a barrel, there would be usually, but not always, a choke. This is a device on the end of it that squeezes it down just a little bit more right at the end of the barrel. The idea with that is that if you're firing a shotgun, you're shooting pellets. And pellets group together tighter if you do that. Now, one of the things that might have occurred to a lot of people out there, including people who actually know what they're doing when they fire a gun, is why is it made to where the shotgun just is tapered from the base of the shotgun shell all the way down to the choke at the muzzle linearly, meaning it's just a long cone shape. Now, if you make it long enough, this would actually work for short shells and maybe even long ones. Or you could just make a long chamber and then taper it from here down. You wouldn't have a forcing cone and then the bore and then down here the choke. You would have it in one long section. Sometimes they're called tri-bores because they are actually made with 3 different bore diameters, but there are other ones that are called squeeze bores, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, the reason I'm going to bring up this is this makes it to where you can easily make an additive design. You can build this with, let's say, a piece of metal tubing you get a hold of that's 81 caliber on the inside and 88.5 caliber on the outside, and that would be fine. Well, but that would be, if you're not aware of the millimeters here showing up, it's 2 millimeters difference. You would have only a 1 millimeter thick outer casing, which is not safe, especially for a chamber. It would be tolerable over the length of it for a barrel, but not for the chamber. Now, the reason I'm bringing that up is you could also just put another 1 millimeter thick layer of metal around it, which would then make it to where this was flush. And that's how a lot of shotguns that you see made on YouTube or on the internet are made. They're 2 layers. That way you can control the thickness, and you have that little extra bit of slack space that you can build it with. And all you have to end up doing is cutting 2 pieces of tubing and chambering them within each other. It doesn't require you to drill anything as much. And again, you can look online and find an 81 caliber inner diameter piece of metal tubing. It's actually used for making stock cars, and it's got almost the same dimensions. So it's kind of begging for you to do it. You stick it inside of a Schedule 40 pipe. Works fine. And the reason that's done is it makes it a lot safer. You get less gap. You don't get this thing slapping and expanding. And it almost matches saami standards. But the problem with that, again, because it's a straight piece of pipe, is it doesn't have a forcing cone, it doesn't have this constriction, it doesn't have a choke. And even the shotgun shell itself inside of it has something coming out of it. that wants to run into one of these things and seal off the opening so it can efficiently use the propellant, the gunpowder. So today's video is going to be about making, well, basically a giant long forcing cone chamber thing, or if you like, a choke. So here we go with the first stage. Chokes work like that. Here we go. They give them various names for what they're used for, but at the extreme end of it, you can have a degree of constriction of 0.055 inches, or ending up being a 67 caliber from something that was ostensibly 73 or 72 and a half caliber. So, yeah. So let's try to find something with a taper like that. Now I'm bringing up a random thing that just doesn't seem like anything you'd ever use for it, but I want to show you all of the variations in what are called, full choke or skeet or cylinder. Each of these company names here decided to declare the cylinder diameter a wide variety, but here are the extreme ends. Increasing it to 74 caliber, which it's not, or bringing it down to 72.2, which it's not. And at this end, the full extra choke here is listed at 67 or 69 caliber. Now, we're going to back up to the previous image. You may have noticed that we're dealing with around that sort of range. So I picked one at random to do this experiment on paper only. This one here is a 64 caliber turkey choke, pretty common type, and it's considered safe enough that if you do something dumb with it or something wrong with it, it probably won't hurt anybody. It'll break the choke or might damage the gun, but it's safe. So I decided to use that as a baseline. Now, what did I look up at some goofy thing we could use here? Well, it's called a chainstay. Now, what that is that's the piece of metal bar that goes back from where you crank on your bicycle back to the wheel. It's the part that follows the length of the chain and has the effect of making the chain stay at a specific length. Chain stay. So you look up those, and again, just like I was talking about before, where we were looking at this, you'd look up something that's like 22.5 millimeter outside diameter, 20.5 millimeter inside diameter. Okay. Well, this one came really close. It's 20.8 millimeter inner diameter and 22.2 on the outside. Now, this is going to be a weird size, and it wouldn't be perfect, but we're going to do this experiment. Now, you end up with something that's this long. It's something like, 18, 16 inches long. And it's got this long space in here that's the right diameter, okay, but it's almost 4 inches. It's like 4 inches or something. Yeah, 4.3 inches. It's too big. But at that point, it's okay because, you want to make it as long as possible. Well, I did this experiment where I looked up these numbers, actually drew them to scale, and then made a little scale item for the 16 millimeter or 63 caliber, 4.63 inch choke diameter, which is considered a fairly heavy choke. And it worked out to only 3.5 inches. So you end up with something that's like 7.5 inches long, and obviously would be too short to make it legally a barrel. But this could be an insert inside of a much longer barrel that's just a shroud over it, and it would provide the effect you need to have, and it would do the experiment. Or you could use this as a choke. This could be added into by shoving it into the middle of it, or on the outside welding it on to a barrel to provide that effect. And it would reduce down the waste of pellets at the target, making them all hit in a fairly small area. I just wanted to bring this up because it's an interesting process of figuring out, looking up the material, seeing what it is, that sort of thing. And the other idea some of you might have come up with is to just get some chokes and jam them into pipes and use them. That doesn't even work when it's supposed to in a shotgun, because a lot of the times this opening here will be very specific to the gun, and it will just create an obstruction which can catch pieces of what's coming out of the shotgun shell and cause problems. But this would end up, these things, in case you didn't notice the price tag, it's a $26 package of 2 of them. You could make a double-barreled shotgun that just shoots really, really fine shot, because you wouldn't want to shoot anything big, and it would actually come out and probably work, sorta. But anyway, that's the video on that subject. Repurposing other materials. And less extreme version of this is to take a piece of metal tubing conduit that you would use that's really thin, heat it up to where it's softened up, and then shrink it down over a very long length to be a very long taper. That will be another video. But I was trying to look up anything that had this taper already, and I found diddly squat. But I did find this, and that did happen to show up correctly. So 22 point something millimeter inner diameter or outer diameter when you look it up. You can find these things. I hope this has been useful. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that.